Welcome to the Connected Yoga Teacher podcast. If you are new here, I'm thrilled that you found us. I'm your host, Shannon Crow. My pronouns are she, her. I'm also a yoga teacher, a mom of 3, and I have to tell you, as of this month, my 3 kids are all in their 20s now. And it just seems like yesterday when they were little. Anyway, mom of 3 young adults now in their 20s. If you have kids that are growing fast, you get what I mean. If you have kids in your life and it's just like, oh my gosh, in a blink, look how fast they grow up. I sound like one of those people all the time. Anyway, they are 3 of my best teachers, so I do like to talk about them quite a bit here on the podcast. I'm also an entrepreneur, and I'm a forever curious student. My dad used to say, Shannon, you ask too many questions. And I like to tease him now and say, well, now look at it. I actually made a job out of asking questions. This podcast is recorded on the traditional land of the Anishinaabe, Odawa, and Mississauga people. If you were to look for it on a map, go to Canada, look for Ontario, and then the Bruce Peninsula. There's a small peninsula of land. We have Lake Huron on one side for water and Georgian Bay on the other side. This podcast was born out of the idea that it's not easy being a yoga teacher, and I wanted a place where yoga teachers could come, listen every week or every other week, and listen to our whole catalog of episodes as well. There's lots of them now. We're at episode 390 today, and feel really supported as you're running this business, as you're learning about yoga, the philosophy of yoga, and also learning, practicing. I wanted you to have a place where you could connect to other yoga teachers, ideas, and inspiration. To our returning listeners, thank you so much for being here again. It means so much that you are spending your time hanging out. Alrighty, let's dive into today's episode. It's a really important one. Today, we have the pleasure of speaking with and learning from 2 remarkable yoga teachers, Katie Blecker and Audrey, who both bring unique perspectives to teaching yoga for individuals who are dealing with low energy. And that might be from a chronic illness, a disability. They're going to get into this a little bit more about what that actually means. And I think this is an episode that if you are trying to make your yoga classes more accessible, this is an episode to definitely have a listen to. Before we get into that, I want to give a shout out of thank you to the team over at OfferingTree. They bring this episode to you, and they also have created the most amazing software. I use it in my own business because it makes everything easier. It automates my bookings, payments, Zoom links, reminders, and so much more. Also, please, if you're checking out OfferingTree for your own yoga business, we have a special podcast listener discount code for you over at OfferingTree.com/Shannon. Alrighty, let's dive in and meet Katie and Audrey. First up, Katie Blecker is a yoga teacher, advocate, and visual artist based in Vancouver, Canada. Her trauma-informed approach focuses on supporting individuals living with chronic illness, pain, disability, and chronic stress. Katie utilizes therapeutic asana, pranayama, and meditation, and she emphasizes the importance of rest in self and community care. Her personal experiences with complex chronic illness fuel her dedication to disability advocacy. Katie is a faculty member at the Vancouver School of Healing Arts. She leads curricula on accessibility in yoga, and she also operates her own online studio. And you'll also get to meet Audrey today, who's a yoga teacher and advocate based in France. As both a disabled and neurodivergent individual, Audrey believes in adapting the practice to the person, not the other way around. Her experiences with complex chronic illnesses shape her teaching and practice. Complemented by extensive training with mind-body solutions and accessible yoga, Audrey aims to share yoga's transformational tools. She fosters practices that serve individuals by centering community, access, and joy. I also want to tell you, as you listen to today's episode, we recorded this a while back, and Katie and Audrey are still doing things together. And I really want to highlight this and share this before we get into it, especially if you are someone dealing with limited energy, or if you have yoga students who are, or if you want to learn more about offering yoga to this population. So Katie and Audrey are co-leading a 5-week series called Yoga for People with Limited Energy. These are therapeutic yoga classes tailored to individuals who are experiencing low or limited energy. Yoga students in the class will engage in slow, accessible movements, restorative postures, guided meditation, breath practices, and have opportunity for community connection. I've also been keeping an eye on another offering that I saw Katie and Audrey share, which is Cozy Yoga Winter Series. This is cozy yoga classes, and they're designed to support participants through the winter months. I love this idea. I will link to both Katie and Audrey's websites because Audrey's also doing yoga sessions, private yoga sessions, retreats, lots of things. So I'll link to both of their websites in the show notes. I just wanted to tell you that before we dive in. So today, Katie and Audrey really share their own personal journeys with chronic illness and limited energy. And they tell us like how these experiences have shaped their inclusive teaching methodologies. And they also talk about the concept of limited energy and what that means and define some things for us as well. And talk to us as yoga teachers about how we can adapt yoga practices to meet people's needs who are dealing with limited energy. And we get into some social justice talk, which it's really interesting how we got there. I'll give you a little hint. Audrey, at one point near the end of the interview, said, "Can I say Free Palestine on this podcast episode?" And I was like, "You sure can." This is one thing that we definitely have connected with as well. And the other thing that they both really talk about is the role of community in fostering a supportive environment for people who are dealing with chronic conditions. And also, oh my gosh, there's so much in this interview. I can't wait for you to hear it. Also, the importance of social media, because I know a lot of us right now, some of us are deciding, that's it, I'm done. I'm leaving social media. Some people are questioning social media. And I love how Katie and Audrey talk about how people dealing with chronic conditions, this is sometimes their only connection to the world and the important role that it plays. So it's really fascinating to listen to this conversation. So let's get there, and I'll stop talking. I'll just ask the questions and we'll get listening to Katie and Audrey much more now. Welcome to the Connected Yoga Teacher Podcast, Audrey and Katie. It's so great to have both of you here today.
Thank you.
Thank you for having us.
I am excited that we get to dive in and talk about how do we teach to a student who has limited energy? And also on the flip side, what about when we have limited energy as a yoga teacher? Before we get into that though, I'd love to know, what is the work that you do? Who do you do it for? And sort of what got you into feeling like, yeah, I'm excited to talk about this. Audrey, do you want to go first and tell us what's the work that you do and who do you do it for?
Yeah, sure. So I'm Audrey and I use she, her pronouns. So I also live in France, in Europe, land of colonizer. And so what do I do? So I'm a yoga teacher and I've been so for a couple of years only. I trained not that long ago. And in my work, I center people who have disabilities, chronic illness, neurodivergence, because I am all these things myself. And for me, it was really hard to find yoga teachers who had those identities and who could teach me and adapt the practices, especially for the asana and meditation practices. So I teach online, and that works really well for me. And lately, I've been collaborating with Katie on a number of workshops for people who have limited energy. So that's usually found in people who have chronic illnesses such as ME, CFS, or any other disabilities and neurodivergence, or people who are just tired because the world is heavy and tiring. So that's it in a nutshell.
Thank you so much for that. Katie, what about you? What's the work that you do and who do you do it for?
Yeah, my pronouns are she, her, and I live on the unceded territories of the Musqueam, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh First Nation. So that's in Vancouver, BC, in Canada. I have been teaching yoga for about 6.5 years. And like Audrey, I, in my work center, primarily working with folks with disabilities and chronic illnesses. I also do quite a bit of work with older adults in retirement and long-term care facilities. I'm somebody as well who has multiple chronic illnesses and disabilities. One of the main ones being ME CFS, which Audrey mentioned in her intro, and it is something that has profoundly affected not only my yoga practice and my and what's accessible to me in yoga, but also pretty much everything in my day-to-day life. And so right now I tend to work with quite a broad range of people, but I am moving towards, as Audrey is, really centering yoga and wellness practices for disabled people and people with chronic illnesses.
Hey, connected yoga teachers, I'm popping in here for a moment because near the end of our interview, actually, is when I asked for a definition from both Audrey and Katie. And so I wanted to pop it in here so that we all have this and learn a little bit as well in terms of what are the definitions and the difference in who prefers to use what definition also. Can either of you, do you want to define MECFS?
Oh, it's chronic fatigue syndrome, CFS.
Okay.
And ME is it's the longest word in the world when you have brain fog.
Oh,
Katie can say it.
Katie, do you know
I'm
it?
well practiced. It's myalgic encephalomyelitis. I can break that down for you if you like. Is that helpful? Yeah. So myalgic is muscle related, muscle pain. Encephalomyelitis is inflammation of the brain and spinal cord. So that's the current clinical term that we have, although there are debates as to whether it's as accurate as it could be. And CFS stands for chronic fatigue syndrome, which I personally don't like. I have several friends with this illness as well who really don't like that term because it carries a lot of stigma. The term fatigue, the term syndrome, they both are very stigmatized. And ME/CFS is not just fatigue, it's a whole host of symptoms. It is a neuroinflammatory disease. It's a neuroimmunological disease. It affects many different systems of the body. And so calling it chronic fatigue syndrome is very reductionary.
Thank you so much for this. This has been so helpful. I think it's important to highlight that when someone comes to us, that we use the words that they use when they talk to us about a diagnosis that they have for this exact reason.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Many people use the term CFS. And so that's why I often just use ME/CFS as and that's often clinically how it's used. But in my personal life, I prefer ME.
I'm so excited that you both are doing this work when you understand it so well. And I'm really grateful that you're both here to sort of shine a light for us in case we are teaching to someone, or in case we start to feel like, hey, that's me, and I've never had someone address that this is how I feel, and now I feel seen and heard here, as a yoga teacher or as a yoga practitioner. What do you think, Audrey, was like a moment when you were in a yoga space or in a yoga class and you thought, okay, this isn't helping because I have limited energy? Or maybe, I'm not pointing fingers at a teacher, but like until we understand what that feels like, it's like we can't understand what would be helpful. So what kind of felt not helpful? Or maybe there was a moment where you're like, this is what I needed.
Mm. So I've always had limited energy because I'm I'm autistic and I've had migraines since my teenage years. So I've always had to live with that. And I started my yoga practice with that in my early 20s. So it's always been something that I had to do with. And I remember in my first yoga asana class where everybody just knew exactly what they were doing, the sun salutations, and I had a good pace, and I was just like, whoa, okay. Um, but I was lucky enough that I had teachers that different teachers that showed me restorative and hatha and vinyasa. And so I kind of knew what I was in for and um what I could do on that day. But when I got my second chronic illness in my early 30s, which really, really, really limited my energy. So that's ME, CFS, and some other neurological condition. The hard part was showing up. It wasn't so much the class. I mean, it was hard, but since the classes that I was already going to were quite gentle, mostly restorative or like gentle hatha, meditation, things like that, but it was really showing up the effort of like coming back from work and already completely exhausted and wiped out and thinking I need to get on my yoga pants because that was a thing at the time for me. And get on my bike in, in British weather because I lived in Britain at the time. It was dark, it was probably raining, and just getting all this was just really, really difficult. And I stopped going. And and also because when I got there, I just wanted to sleep and I felt like I was missing out. I just I just didn't feel like it wasn't nourishing to me anymore. And so I had to I kind of gave up for a while until someone talked to me about um, online yoga, and that worked a lot better for me. So I don't know if you want me to go on about this or if we can talk about this later. But yeah, so for me, it was really just showing up. And we do say that, don't we? Like as teachers, like, oh, you've done the hard part, you've showed up. Um, but that was literally, literally too much effort. Like when you have limited energy, when you have a chronic illness like ME, for example, you have a certain number of spoons or like free life. And if you go over that, you're done for. Like it's sometimes it takes you days to recover if you do too much. And so sometimes turning up to that yoga class, I felt like it was too much. So that's why online yoga is pretty cool because you can just stay in your pajamas and just switch on your computer or your phone and there you are. And nobody is judging because you you look like you don't have your fancy yoga pants or whatever, you know. Cool.
That's really great to hear how online yoga has been so helpful and also just to hear your experience. Thank you for sharing that. Um, Katie, do you want to talk about maybe first of all, maybe I should have started there, but like, how do we define limited energy? Because I want to make sure that we're not just like, oh, today I'm feeling like I just am like a little more tired than usual.
Yeah, that's a really important thing to delineate. I generally, and of course, it may vary, person to person, depending on the particular conditions that may be experienced. For me, I can say that limited energy is like a profound absence of being able to create energy through the body. So it's not being tired. It's a severe level of fatigue that can't really be recovered from on a day to day level. And so I can speak to it through having ME CFS. We start out with almost like an impairment in energy on a daily basis. So when I wake up, I don't have the same amount of energy as my partner does, for instance. So I'm already beginning from a place of deficit versus if I didn't have limited energy. And then everything I do throughout the day depletes that small amount of energy that I have to the point where I can only do a very limited amount of activity before I start to run on fumes, essentially. And Audrey, I don't know if you would agree with that or add anything to that.
Yeah, 100% agree. And I would add that when you wake up in the morning, you already know you're tired. It's a weird feeling. You you may have had, sometimes I've had 10 hours of sleep. Most nights I have 6, 7 hours, which is pretty good for most people. But I wake up and I'm already tired. And that is a weird reality to live with. And also, I would add um, that sometimes you think that you have, okay, I have a little bit of energy, enough today that I can cook a meal and sit down and eat and maybe go for a walk with my dog, something like that. And then you won't. You'll barely make it to the kitchen and then that's it. So it's just when you plan and you always have to adapt according to the energy that you feel that you have. And sometimes you get it wrong. And so that's when you really need to just be compassionate towards yourself because it just changes all the time. It's not like our phone that says like exactly how much battery there is. It's our body, it's our mind, and it's fluid. Um, and that's a skill. And at the same time, it's something that you every day, every hour, it changes. So you always have to learn and relearn. So I think it's quite difficult for people who don't have chronic fatigue or limited energy, however that they experience it, to really understand that level of fatigue and how it limits your day and your capacity to show up.
Thank you so much to both of you for really sharing how this feels. Um, and so, what do you think then, Katie? I'll start with you and then we'll ask you, Audrey, and in terms of what do you think that yoga teachers need to know about this? Like for someone who maybe hasn't experienced this, what is helpful when because I'm thinking of one thing that wouldn't be helpful, and that is like, okay, like you just have to set up this routine, and then I'm gonna give you this yoga series and it's 30 minutes and I want you to do it every day. And like if you don't, you just won't be enlightened. I'm just thinking of I don't know yoga teachers that sound to that extreme, but like, you know what I mean? Like this real pressure to like I see Audrey saying, maybe there are some of us. I'm even thinking of myself like in my early 20s as a yoga teacher. I don't think I would have been able to hold space in the same way that I could now as a yoga teacher. So, Katie, what do you think we need to know as yoga teachers? What would be helpful?
I think first and foremost, remembering that our students are the experts in their own bodies and their own experiences. And that overrides everything that I could potentially offer somebody, any advice I have, all of that stuff. The student or the individual we're working with knows their body best. And so if somebody's telling us, hey, I, have this energy limiting condition or this chronic illness or this disability, it's not about trying to fix it or change it. It's about working with the person with who they are and how they are in the moment. And I think that is a really vital skill to have as a yoga teacher.
Oh my gosh, I just want to highlight that it's not our job to fix this. So please, yoga teachers, do not be like, well, if you do these 5 poses every day, then it will be the yoga cure. It's super important that we're not giving that message to people and meeting them where they are.
No, I absolutely agree with what Katie said. I think if there's one thing to know for yoga teachers when they want to work with someone who has a disability or chronic illness, or I think, and I actually scratched that with anyone, is that yoga will not heal or fix anyone. And why would you want to be that person anyway? Like, why? What kind of ego trip are you on? And I think I'm being a bit mean here, but I've seen that a lot, and it really bugs me that I have a huge medical team. They can't cure me, fix me, or heal me. Um, and the fact is that I am also not broken, and I do not wish chronic illness or disability to anyone. However, it is not a defect. It is not something to be ashamed of or repaired or ignored or, so I think yoga teachers, a good yoga teacher for me would be, yes, to ask questions, to listen to the person that's in front of them and to see that person for who they are as best as they can with the information they have, and to realize that sometimes when we come in with an idea or a script of here's what we're going to do today, to be ready to change all of that plan. Because what may have helped yesterday might not help today. I was able yesterday to do quite a few asana classes. They were gentle and a lot of good slow pacing and things like that. But today there was no way that I could do this. So for me, it was meditation today. I mean, it's meditation every day, but it was more of a movement is not always that nourishing for me, and I think for Katie as well. So I think it's important to look at all of the wonderful practices of yoga and not always focus on asana and movement or all the things that maybe in your YTT were really the main focus. There's so many great things in yoga that we can play with and learn, and that will be very precious to someone else in their lives as well, not just during practice. So yeah. So that was kind of like a bit all over the place. So you can magically edit it so that I sound really clever. Thank you.
It does sound like there was so much there. Thank you. It does sound clever. It sounds like someone who has the lived experience. And it's reminding me of this time when I worked in a physio office. I was working with someone with traumatic brain injury, and we did 5 minutes of practice. You know, she paid for an hour of session. She did 5 minutes, and then she was like, that's all I can do today. And I felt like, no, like inside, I didn't say it. I felt like, no, you have to get your money's worth. Like 5 minutes, you've got a whole hour with me. And instead, I just listened to her and said, okay, and followed her lead every week. And that's what she needed. If I would have forced her through an hour of yoga, that would not have felt like, oh yeah, now I've got my money's worth, you know. That I think we set up a lot of expectations of what a yoga practice needs to look like. And also thank you for saying, like, it's not our job to fix someone. Connected yoga teachers, I'm popping in here for a moment to tell you about something with OfferingTree. So I've been talking about OfferingTree for years. I've been using it in my own business. And one of the things that I know from yoga teachers is that they can sometimes grow their yoga business, but get to this place where they feel stuck. And I've been there too. I often feel this as a business owner. So you're not alone in that. And that's why I will share OfferingTree in those moments. So sometimes it's like, hey, I'm feeling really stuck on how do I accept online payments, or how do I make sure that everyone signs the waiver, or how do I market my classes and, you know, create a website if I don't have one or mine's really outdated. You know, how do I make sure that only 15 people sign up for this class because that's all that can fit in the space. We get stuck on a lot of details as yoga teachers, and these are really important details as well. Also, we need a software that's affordable and easy to use that really takes care of everything. We don't need more problems on our plate as yoga teachers who are running businesses. And that's why oftentimes I'll be doing consultation calls with yoga teachers and say, like, I really think you should check out OfferingTree. It's an honest thing that I share all the time, and that's why I'm excited to share it here with you on the podcast. And I love that we collaborate and they bring this episode to you. So if you're feeling like you need a website, you need ways to get people signing up online or paying online, or you need to do your waivers, check out OfferingTree, and we have a special discount code for you over at OfferingTree.com/Shannon. Alrighty, let's get back into today's episode with Audrey and Katie. I know that yoga has a lot of benefits. Maybe that's what we can go into here as well. I feel like I'm getting ahead of myself. But so feel free to jump in. But I feel like that's what we could cover. Like, we're not looking at it as a cure, but how does yoga help someone who has limited energy? Katie, do you want to talk about that?
Yeah, absolutely. I just want to add on to this previous conversation for a second. I also just want to highlight that sometimes when we are in a place where we are wanting to quote unquote fix somebody or help them in that way, I think it takes, or it would be beneficial for us to take a step back and consider why that is. Like, why do I have this drive to want to change something about somebody? Usually it comes from an internalized sense of ableism, which we all have, you know, like it's sometimes when I bring this up with groups I work in a yoga teacher training talking about accessibility. And sometimes when I bring up internalized ableism, it riles people up a little bit because nobody wants to believe or think that they have, you know, something negative like that inside of them. But you know what? Like it's drilled into us on a societal level. So I think we just have to let go of that feeling as much as we can and just look at the truth of the matter and And that is that, we're all unique individuals. Yoga teaches us to embrace our, the things that we can relate to each other on. Like we all have the same, center within us that we all share, but we're all a unique expression of that. And disability and chronic illness are another unique expression of the way the universe manifests, right? So it's not a bad thing. It's not a wrong thing. It's not anything that needs to be changed. And if you have that inclination, it's really valuable to look at why. Where does that stem from? And then on to your other question, Shannon. Sorry, I derailed the conversation a little bit there.
No, I'm glad you did. It's such a good ad.
Benefits of yoga for people with limited energy. I mean, there's many. It's hard to just summarize. I think for one, it gives us an opportunity to find a safe place to connect with ourselves. I mean, granted, the context of it has to be safe. We have to be in a class or a space that does feel safe for us. A lot of us have limited energy due to difficult conditions. Like, again, for me with ME, CFS, and the other illnesses I have, it can create like a disharmony within me in a way where I feel at odds with my body. And yoga has been the thing that has kind of brought me back to myself and taught me how to live with more equanimity and more kindness towards myself, which of course extends to how I relate to and connect with others.
Audrey, do you have things to add to that where you feel like this is the benefit that yoga gives me or others that I work with?
Yeah, I really agree with what Katie was saying. I think in yoga, one of the things that we say a lot is listen to your body, how it feels in this moment, coming back to your breath, coming back to your sensations, feel the support around you, things like that. I say these things all the time. And sometimes that's even hard for me to do. And so, but that's been something that has been so crucial for the past 9-10 years for me to actually reconnect with my body in a more compassionate way and to really listen and be mindful of what I'm doing, where my thoughts are going. Because as I live with that limited energy, with those limitations, really important that I actually check in multiple times a day. How am I doing? Have I got enough energy to do this? And reconnect to the why and why am I doing this? How am I going to do this? And it sounds like a lot of work, and it is, but it's also a skill that allows me to live and not just run around like a headless chicken and do all the things in one day, because that's what everybody does. So why not me? Why not me? Because I'm not other people and I have limitations, and I don't want to spend the next few days in bed completely in pain, and that's something with, especially with in yogic philosophy, Svadhyaya, so self-inquiry, it's been really helpful for me, like really asking questions every day for myself and really practice this. And then the second thing would be community, especially with online yoga now. I'm connecting with you, Shannon. I'm connected with Katie, and I would have never done that if we didn't have these communities existing. And for me, like when I log into my own classes, whether I'm teaching or I'm practicing, really important for me to have that sense of the collective and to have access to this, because it's really quite isolating for me, and I know for a lot of people, to be ill, to be disabled, because you can't, as I said, you can't do all the things. You can't always be outside, especially we're still in a pandemic. There's a lot of risk. There's a lot of energy that you need to spend to go somewhere, or to, even if it's something nice, it is energy that you're spending. And so for me, like, the communities that I found online have been so essential, and they're all yoga spaces, to be honest, where I meet with other disabled people, chronically ill, and you have that safety, that understanding, that compassion, that, and it's like a mirror, like you give it to other people and then you get it back. And sometimes when you really struggle with that sense of, ahimsa and loving kindness and all these things, but then you see it in other people and you're like, well, yeah, okay. Oh, that's what it feels like. So um, that's what I try to infuse in my teaching as well. And to really have that sense of compassion and grace, and for yourself and for the collective. I think it's really important. And it's very present in all yoga philosophies, I think.
This is amazing. I'm also thinking it's bringing to mind that often, when marketing goes off the rails with yoga, it preys on vulnerabilities. But instead, what I hear you both saying is like, these are the benefits of yoga. They are there. And this is how it helps me to connect more with myself and then my community, and to be really aware, and then bring in all of those yamas and niyamas instead of the like, here's how I'm going to solve all my problems today. um, yeah. Okay. Now I'm super curious, because as anyone knows who's ever taught yoga, like, anyone who hasn't taught yoga doesn't understand that teaching yoga is work and requires energy. It's not like just laying around on the floor and doing like a gentle restorative class. So what about on those days, Katie, if you want to start with this, what do you do when you're a yoga teacher and you have limited energy?
Yeah, that's a great question. And, I've had to learn through trial by error quite a lot, myself anyway. First of all, I have had to let go of teaching in studios. I know Audrey mentioned she primarily just teaches online, which is wonderful. And I'm hoping to work towards that myself, though I'm still in person in a few places. But I had to let go of some things due to lack of accessibility in terms of my energy, like studios up big flights of stairs, stuff like that. I just had to stop doing altogether, because I would get there and by the time I was set up for class, I would have no energy to actually do the teaching. So it really didn't serve anybody. Generally speaking, I try to space out my schedule so that I have a lot of rest time between my teaching so that I can rest before and rest afterwards. That is one of my accessibility needs in terms of this work. I am really honest with my students as well, that if I'm having a day where just not, I'm struggling, I tell them and I say, I'm just going to sit here and talk as little as possible. It is what it is. They also understand if I cancel. Like I have learned to be really quite transparent. And I'm not saying everybody has to be that way, because not everyone's comfortable with that necessarily. But I personally have become quite comfortable just being really open and honest. And I think that's helped our community a little bit as well, because it just kind of creates a little bit more of a space of authenticity. Yeah. So there's just going to be some days where it's just not happening, and you just kind of have to be okay with that too. Yeah.
Super helpful. Audrey, what about you?
Similar to Katie, one of the key skills is to learn how to pace. So that takes quite a lot of planning. For example, I'm not teaching today, otherwise I wouldn't be doing this. That would be too much for me to do this and to teach. I think one of the key thing as well is I was saying earlier, like to listen to your body, but also know what nourishes you and what drains your energy. So for me, social interactions, they're kind of sometimes it's really nourishing and sometimes it's draining. And so most of the time it's a little bit of both. So that's the same with teaching, because you give so much. You holding the space for 30 minutes, 60 minutes or more. And so many people are there and they trust you. So you have to honor that trust by being authentic, by being also truthful with what's happening with you. But that takes energy for sure. So when I know that I'm teaching on those days, I usually do some things that are nourishing to me. So I usually try not to be on social media too much just before, or I wouldn't have like an important appointment, or I'm not going out most of those days. It may sound like a lot for a normie, like someone who's who's got like 100% of energy, but for me, like it's part of my life, so I don't really see it as much as a hindrance, but more as an opportunity to be to give myself some care and some grace, and just be like, well, this is what it is, and I'm so lucky that I get to do this wonderful job in my pajamas, in my home or someone else's home, as I am now. And just to have all these spaces at the end of the class and see some kind of transformation. And sometimes a lot of the time that gives me energy, and it gives me enough energy to carry on for the next class or the next, I need to post that online, or, there's a lot, at the moment we're talking a lot about teaching, but for yoga teachers, a lot of the stuff is also marketing, administrations. There's the preparation of the class, all of these things. And all these things are not exactly nourishing, but it's also finding like some kind of joy, or at least some care for yourself. I'm doing this because actually just filling that blank. In my experience, I'm doing all these things because it is nourishing for me to turn up for class. And to see people who actually trust me and who are looking forward to spend an hour with all of us together practicing. And yeah, and in some ways we were talking about community earlier, that also gives me some energy or can switch something in my brain when I'm feeling not so good mentally and something like that. So it's not easy, far from it. And it can be very frustrating. And sometimes I wish I could do way, way more. However, it's also important to realize that there is a good enough in life, and sometimes it does. Yeah, it is good enough, I guess.
Amazing. This is super helpful. Like, I appreciate you both sharing so much here because I know it also can't be easy to try and explain how this feels as a yoga practitioner and then also as a yoga teacher. And I appreciate that you said, like, you could share this, you can be really authentic with your students, and then there are times where you might not want to share everything, and that's also valid. Um, I guess I want to ask, like, if our yoga teachers who are listening, if they want to learn more, um, you two are collaborating on something. Katie, do you want to talk about how people can work with you further?
Yeah, Audrey and I are working on building a community essentially online for practitioners with limited energy. So, right now, we are running a series of workshops that people can attend. They're spaced out enough that we have recovery time after each workshop as well, which is important for Audrey and myself and also for our participants. Um, so that would be, I would say, the main thing right now is our collaborative efforts. We really do welcome anybody with any source of limited energy, whether that's through disability, chronic illness, neurodivergence, burnout. I think it's really important that we have more spaces where we can come together and share our lived experiences with other people who get it, because it can be really isolating, to be the only one in a group or one of two or whatever it is, in this space we're creating. It's really a community oriented. That's our goal with this. Audrey, do you want to add on to that?
No.
You did a great job, Katie. That's what that means.
Yeah.
Audrey, maybe you want to tell us, like, where do people go to find that? Like, is there a website that you think they should go to, or should they find you both on? We'll include all the links in the show notes, by the way.
So for that workshop specifically, it is on Katie's website. Then otherwise, I do have my own website, which is aujo.com, so auzho.com. But we're also very active on Instagram. In particular, Katie always puts some really great videos about her own experience with chronic illness and ableism. And I'm a bit more, I don't know, fluffy. I love nature. So you'll find loads of pictures of flowers with probably some cool for, can I say free Palestine?
You certainly can.
Amazing.
Yeah. So yeah, follow us there, because that's where the community is as well. Like, I love it when people connect through social media, because then you get to see a bit more about ourselves and what our values are as well. Like, for me, it's been really clarifying these past few months. I'm sure that's been the same for you. And I've learned a lot as well from other people who have, like, either similar energy limiting conditions or disabilities. Like, I think we say a lot of bad things about social media, but seriously, for disabled people, it's a lifeline. So I wouldn't be too harsh on that, because I've learned a lot about how to use a wheelchair, what mobility aids are, or how to talk about ME or anything like that, and or like just people having fun and just finding some joy in their lives. And that's not something that we see a lot in other media. Or so yeah, so that was quite a long-winded answer, but basically website and Instagram.
Perfect. I'll link to those because this is how we connected. I remember like I had possibly it's undiagnosed like long COVID. So I had limited energy. I was feeling really, so many things, angry, depressed, whatever, all the things of like really wanting to do more and feeling like I couldn't. And at the same time, watching you both like speaking up for social justice topics at the same time and sharing nature photos or whatever's going on in life, like, or your dog photo or whatever, like all the things, I definitely felt that connection. So that's there. I guess I want to bring this up is like, okay, I hear from many people who I would not say define themselves as being people with disabilities or limited energy saying to me, I just cannot keep up with social justice in Palestine right now. It's too much. Um, I can't post about it. I'm not sure I can speak up about it. And then I see both of you saying, well, we are both doing that. I mean, I want to say, like, sometimes I also see and recognize that we all need to take breaks and have breaks from social media. But do either of you want to speak to that in terms of like, how do you speak up for social justice when you have limited energy? Katie, do you want to start?
Sure. Yeah, this is I think, a very important question. It's also maybe one that is very nuanced. A lot of it, I think, comes down to privilege as to why people choose not to speak up about um, certain injustices. For myself, and I'm fairly certain Audrey will relate to this, but my worldview is very rooted in disability justice. And because that is my belief system, I can't not speak up about these things. It just is a part of who I am as a person at this point. And so to me, it is integral to not only who I am, but also the philosophy of yoga. I think of ahimsa, I think of satya. And for me to be in alignment with yoga philosophy is to also stand up for social justice.
Very well said. Audrey, what would you add to that?
I'm going to try to be nuanced. That's something that is such an essential question. So thank you for asking it. I'm the same as Katie. For me, everything takes its roots in disability justice. If you look at this, then it answers most of the problems that we have in the world. And I think, I've always been an activist since a young age. That's how I was raised. I've always thought that my happiness was linked to other people, to other beings, to the land, to the universe. I do not see any separation. To me, that's always how I felt. I don't know if it's an autistic thing or if it's just a me thing. And when I started studying yoga, and in particular the Gita, I was like, okay, yeah, I'm not alone with this. This is what it is. This is the reality of the world, is that my happiness and my sorrow, my grief, my joy, my sense of wonder of life is linked to everything else. And it's the same. We are not different. I am you and you are me, and I am this tree and this tree is me. So how can I not, even when I'm really, really exhausted, how can I not speak up? How can I not share the huge amount of privilege I have as a white European to speak up for others who are oppressed? Because I feel oppressed. but I still have privilege. And until I die, I will use that power and privilege to help others and the land and all beings. Because my liberation is linked to theirs, and it's not a selfish thing, but it is something that I believe we can achieve. Yeah, and I really struggle with people who are still bogged down in individualism and capitalism and all the isms. But I also understand they're on their own journey, but sometimes I wish they would hurry up. And and that's why I think all of us do spend probably too much time on Instagram or with people around us talking about these things. But I'd rather talk about this than, I don't know, goodness, what else is, on other people's agendas at the moment, like the Kardashians or whatever. I don't know
What
what's
kind
going
of
on
water
that
bottle
fashion.
to get and how to race.
But that's interesting, the water bottle, because you can bonk.
You can use it. Oh my
God. Yeah, I don't know. It's just it's funny when you start talking about these things, and I was saying earlier how clarifying it is when you see who's on, who's doing what and how they're talking about it and what tools are they using. And I've learned so much over the past 8 months in particular about collective liberation, and I found that absolutely beautiful because it's helping me show up even more. So whichever effort I put in, I get it. I get so much back. So not that it's easy. I've wept way too much over the past months, way more than in all my lifetime so far, I think. But it's worth it.
I appreciate you saying this so much because when I was really down and sick, people were saying to me, well, this is probably like because you're speaking up so much. And I was like, no. No,
What?
I'm still doing that. Yeah.
What?
Yeah. Yeah. Mhm.
People will say the darnest things like this. Okay.
Anything you'd add to that, Katie? Because Audrey's like, that's it. She's not gonna keep going on that.
Yeah, no, Shannon, I've had a similar experience with that as well. And yeah, I would just reiterate that, participation in movements that are pushing for liberation is not something that drains us. It's fundamentally, it is about liberation. So it should be liberating to be participating in that. You know what I mean? Of course, like if you're running yourself ragged completely, that's one thing, but it's about sustainability. Like I've heard many activists speak on, it's not, it's a marathon. It's not a sprint. Right. And so any way that we can contribute, however small, or, how we think it may be small, however small that is a part of the greater picture. And so there's really, I think, ways that everyone can participate in it no matter what. It's just about committing to it and looking at our privileges and using those privileges for the greater good.
I appreciate this so much. Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Audrey.
No, I would just add to that it's important to leave competition out. Like going to a protest is not better than posting on social media. It's not better than signing a petition or donating. It's important to know that showing up is the most important to to the best ability that you have in this present moment. And I know some people who have not really posted on social media, but who have been really educating themselves, who have donated, who have spoken up in their families or things like that. And then you have all these beautiful student protests who are putting their lives in danger and the future on hold, basically. But I would say, yeah, great. As a disabled person, I could not be there, but it doesn't mean that my commitment to collective liberation, to a free Palestine, to free Congo, free Tigray, and all the other places, it's not less or less than what they're doing. It's just what I'm able to do to the best of my ability. And as Katie was saying, in a sustainable way. So I could go to a protest, but then wipe myself completely white and not show up for weeks and weeks. What's the point in that? So I think it's important to it's a good opportunity I think, to really assess what your skills are, what your abilities are, what can I bring up to the conversation, and find some rest, bringing your practices of rest. I've seen it a lot popping up in even in the student protests, like that care, that compassion, like people bringing in from outside some food, some water. That's something that you can do with your limited energy. Just take an hour just to go and just, I've had some of my teachers showing up and do some meditation classes. I think it's be creative within your capacity at that moment. And it's a marathon. It's definitely not a sprint. So not that we can run at all, but whatever, we'll take that image. I would have run a marathon, Katie. What are you on about?
I just want to add another thing. Just speaking to privileges and stuff. And because I am currently representing my community on this podcast, in terms of folks with ME CFS, I have a lot of privilege because I still do have the energy to participate in things in this way. I have the energy to be able to be on a podcast, to post on social media, and that kind of stuff. There are people with severe and very severe ME CFS who cannot tolerate any external stimuli, who are bedbound, who are tube fed, who are very, very sick and don't have the medical care that is actually needed. We're very, very many years behind in medical research for this illness. And so I just also want to name that as well. Like, I'm using the privilege that I have because I have it. I may not always have it. I don't know. But I think that's just important to keep in context as well.
Super important. And I love how you said, like, the actions aren't like, oh, this action's more important, or you have to do this action as well. I saw someone change their little Wi-Fi for their phone to just say free Palestine. So when they're out and about, then it just pops up as like Wi-Fi access. And I think that's brilliant. That's like one of the simplest things we can do.
Cool.
Okay, there was something else I wanted to say.
I'll just say,
oh yeah, go ahead.
My ringtone now is a song that just says like free Palestine, free Palestine. I'm not gonna sing it. But so every time that I hear it, now it brings me joy because I only get spam pretty much like frosters and stuff, and now I let it ring. And even when I'm outside, so I've been in a shop going like free Palestine, free Palestine. Yeah, it's just a funny, quirky thing, but it brings me joy.
I love it. I love it. Thank you both so much for addressing this and also for connecting online. Like, it's been really fun to get to know you, to see the work that you're doing. We'll make sure to include the links to your websites, your social media so that people can reach out and follow along with what you're doing, ask you questions. They can post questions in our comment section or ask you directly. And just thank you both for doing this work.
Thank you for having us, Shannon. This was such a pleasure.
Yeah, thank you so much. And thank you for being such a great advocate for real yoga and for showing up like you do. Yeah, it's really important to have people like you out there. So thank you so much for having us.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Audrey and Katie. And thank you, dear listener, for tuning into this episode. Wow, there was so much in this conversation. It went a little longer than some of our conversations do because there was so much. And I wanted to get all of that in. I just had more and more questions. And Katie and Audrey have a wealth of inspiring knowledge and thought-provoking questions and ideas. I really felt like Katie and Audrey remind us how powerful yoga can be when we adapt it to meet people where they are, whether that's like getting flexible with our class plan to teaching online or creating more low energy options, or simply creating a yoga space, a yoga class, a yoga setting where students feel really seen and supported. So for me, my key takeaway in this, one of the key takeaways was this is all about empathy, understanding, and showing up and honoring that in our teaching. And of course, the importance of community and how vital that is, not just for students living with chronic conditions, but really for all of us. I don't know about you, but that we're watching a lot of things. I'm a neighbor to the US. Most of our listeners are based out of the US, the majority of them. We have a lot of listeners from all over the world, but a big chunk of our listeners live in the US. And the one thing I keep going back to and finding strength in is community and community care. It is not in the existing leadership and governments that are, it looks like some of them are out there to cause harm and not be helpers. And so I really feel now more than ever, we need to lean on community, create communities, find the people in your community who are into collaboration, whether that's, a yoga studio where people want to work collectively and help each other, or you want to do some volunteer time at your local food bank, or you're looking for a community of people who care about the environment, or, all kinds of things we can do to really help community, be one of the helpers, or connect all of the helpers together so that it's a little less burden on individuals. I wasn't really going to get into politics too much in this episode because, I don't know. I feel like you all know this. You get it. You're practicing yoga. You're learning yoga philosophy, and we are watching so much happen. But I can say, as a Canadian, I deeply love the people of the US. And even though our news is saying right now that we are now in a full-on trade war, Canada and the US, I know that we're still very connected as a community. And I know many people are going for the same things. So I just want to put that out there and send big hugs. If you're feeling like the world's been a lot, we're going to need our energy. We're going to need to work together to care for the collective. We really need to look into how we can be allies for immigrants, for trans and queer folks, for people who are feeling, financial strain right now. We need to be allies for a lot of our community members. So that's the work I'm here for. That's yoga to me. I hope this episode sparks some ideas for how you can, teach a more inclusive yoga style, make yoga more inclusive in some way, even if it's tiny, even if you're doing that already. Also bringing compassion into your own practice towards yourself and out into the spaces where you teach. I'm so grateful that you hung out here to listen to this whole episode here today. It means a lot. I'll also share a very quick update about my personal life because you're listening all the way to the end. Speaking of community care, I might have told you already in a previous episode, if you heard it, that I have a short-term contract working at a Native cultural center in my local city. It's called Mwekwedong, and it's an amazing place where there's so much community care. I'm working in the Wisanata program, which is the Let's Eat program. So I get to talk about food, how to grow food, how to cook food, batch cooking, preserving, canning, native plants, pollinator plants, earth-friendly practices, lots of things. And I can tell you that I also see clearer the need in communities, and it's all over the place. There are many reasons why communities are struggling, but this isn't just an issue in Canada. More people are accessing the food banks more than ever. More people are struggling financially. More people are struggling feeling isolated. And so I'm just going to throw this out there, is there some way that you can build this into your existing yoga classes? Maybe, donating some time to teach yoga at a center, or do a teaching gig where you get paid. You decide what you need, but find some way of giving back to your community, whether that's teaching yoga or helping out to feed people or, whatever it is. I can tell you that diving in and being part of collective care, community care work has been amazing for my heart. It's really where I need to be right now. I feel like I'm showing up and doing yoga. I was thinking this week, I need to also remember to set my intention in the morning and bring a little yoga into the space where I'm working, which I'm welcome to do as well. So, yeah. Anyway, figuring it out as I go. I will tell you, it's been quite a learning experience because I've been an entrepreneur working for myself for 20 years. In that time, I've been managing yoga studios and teaching yoga and doing all kinds of things, but 20 years of not having like a regular set work schedule for someone else. And that's been interesting in itself as well. Okay, that's it. Connected Yoga Teachers. Gosh, you've listened to me long enough now. I would love to hear your questions. We are getting close to episode 3. No, not 300. Oh my gosh, we're getting close to episode 400. And we're also getting close to 9 years of podcasting. I had to go and check that. Connected Yoga Teachers. Yes, we're getting close to our 9-year episode, which is unbelievable to me to just keep putting out content, regular content every week or every other week for 9 years. It's possible, friends. If you are ever thinking I want to write an article or I want to write a chapter of a book, set your goal, and it is possible because I never thought that I'd make it to 9 years of podcasting. And I would love to answer your questions. So if you have a question, you can email me, Shannon@theconnectedyogateacher.com, or you can leave a voice message. I love those. From our website, theconnectedyogateacher.com. There's a button right there to leave a voice message. You can message me, tag me in our Facebook group as well. It's called the Connected Yoga Teacher Group. And if you're looking for that, go to our website as well, theconnectedyogateacher.com, and the Join the Community button is right on the homepage. All right. Thank you to our incredible team who makes this possible, this whole podcast for you and me and everyone each and every week. They bring it to life. They're amazing humans over here working. Thank you also, dear listener. You're really the heart of the podcast, and I'm so grateful for your time here today. I know you're busy, and it means a lot that we've got to hang out in this time. And before we wrap up, I want to close with a question. What will you be doing this week to stay connected to yourself, your yoga practice, and to your community so that you can share the yoga that lights you up?